He divorced her after she helped make him rich. He said she was too plain, too old-fashioned, and too embarrassing to stand beside a successful man. She cried herself to sleep while he moved on with a glamorous new life. But years later, during the biggest meeting of his career, he saw her walk into the room and instantly exploded. In front of powerful executives, he grabbed her arm, called her a nobody, and tried to throw her out like trash. What made the moment unforgettable was this: the man humiliating her had absolutely no idea that his entire future depended on the woman he had just disgraced. Why was the ex-wife he abandoned sitting in that room? What secret had she been hiding all these years? And what would happen when everyone discovered the truth he never saw coming? Years before that shocking meeting, life looked very different. Nerissa Quill and Holden Bryce lived in a small apartment near Charleston Harbor. The paint on the walls was peeling. The furniture was old. Sometimes they had to choose between paying a bill and buying something they needed. But they were happy. At least Nerissa was. She believed in Holden with all her heart. Every morning, Holden left home carrying dreams much bigger than his wallet. He wanted to build a marine development company. He wanted luxury homes. He wanted expensive cars. He wanted respect. Most people laughed at him. Nerissa never did. "You'll get there one day," she would tell him. Holden often smiled. "Only if you stay beside me." Back then, he meant it. When banks rejected his business proposals, Nerissa spent nights helping him rewrite them. When investors walked away, she encouraged him not to quit. When suppliers tried to trick him into bad contracts, she noticed details he missed. More than once, her advice saved him from disaster. One evening, Holden rushed into their apartment carrying papers. "Nerissa, I found a huge opportunity." She looked over the documents. Her smile faded. Something felt wrong. She spent hours reading every page. Near midnight she found hidden terms that would have buried Holden in debt. The next morning she showed him. Holden stared at the contract. His face turned pale. "You just saved me." Nerissa laughed softly. "We saved you." Moments like that became common. As the years passed, Holden's company slowly grew. Then it grew faster. Then faster still. Money started arriving. The old apartment became a luxury home overlooking the water. The used sedan became luxury vehicles. The man who once worried about groceries now attended private business dinners. At first, success changed their life. Then it changed Holden. The warning signs appeared slowly. So slowly Nerissa almost missed them. At parties, Holden stopped introducing her proudly. At business events, he asked her to stay home. When she spoke, he interrupted her. When she offered advice, he dismissed it. One night, after returning from a luxury event, Nerissa stood in front of a mirror. The simple dress she wore suddenly felt different. Not because she disliked it. Because Holden had spent the entire evening comparing her to wealthy women. Women dressed in expensive designer clothing. Women who lived for attention. Women who knew nothing about the sacrifices behind Holden's success. Nerissa quietly wiped away tears. A small crack had appeared in her marriage. She hoped it would heal. Instead, it widened. Months later, Holden began spending more time with a woman named Aubrey Lennett. Aubrey was beautiful, confident, stylish. She knew how to impress wealthy people. Whenever she entered a room, attention followed. At first Holden claimed they were only friends. Nerissa wanted to believe him. But deep inside, she already knew the truth. Small clues appeared everywhere. Late-night messages. Secret meetings. Sudden business trips. The signs kept growing. One evening, Nerissa found herself sitting alone at their dining table. The food had gone cold. Holden was 3 hours late. Again. When he finally arrived, he barely looked at her. "Sorry," he said. "You forgot again." "I was busy." Nerissa lowered her eyes. The distance between them felt bigger than the room. Weeks later, she accidentally overheard part of a conversation. Holden was speaking to a wealthy investor. The investor laughed. "You've outgrown your wife," Instead of defending her, Holden laughed too. The words stabbed deeper than any knife. That night Nerissa locked herself in the bathroom and cried. For the first time, she wondered if the man she loved was disappearing. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet fear began growing. A fear that all her sacrifices might someday mean nothing to him. She had no idea how right that fear would become. Because Holden Bryce was already preparing to make the cruelest decision of his life. And when that decision finally came, it would break her heart in ways she never imagined possible. The cruelest decision of Holden Bryce's life arrived on a bright afternoon that Nerissa would never forget. 4 days, she had felt something was wrong. The distance between them had become impossible to ignore. The man who once called her his greatest blessing now barely looked at her. The man who once asked for her advice now acted as if her words had no value. Still, Nerissa held on to hope. 15 years of love could not disappear overnight. At least that was what she told herself. That afternoon, Holden asked her to meet him in the living room. His voice sounded cold. Too cold. Nerissa walked downstairs and found him sitting alone. No smile. No warmth. No affection. Just silence. A strange feeling settled in her chest. "Holden, what's wrong?" she asked softly. He took a deep breath. "We need to talk." Her heart immediately began racing. Those 4 words rarely brought good news. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Holden placed a folder on the table. Nerissa looked down. Divorce papers. Her hands froze. The room suddenly felt smaller. "What is this?" she whispered. "You know what it is." Tears instantly filled her eyes. "No." Holden looked away. "I'm not happy anymore." The words hit harder than she expected. "What did I do?" "It's not about what you did." "Then what is it about?" For a moment, Holden hesitated. Then years of hidden thoughts finally came pouring out. "You don't fit into my life anymore." Nerissa stared at him. "I don't understand. My world is different now." The sentence felt like a knife. He stood and walked toward the large window overlooking the harbor. "The people I deal with now are different." "Different how?" Holden turned around. "They have class. They have style. They understand the life I live." Nerissa felt her heart breaking piece by piece. "And I don't." He shook his head. "You still think like we're struggling in that tiny apartment." A painful silence filled the room. Flashbacks rushed through her mind. The nights she stayed awake helping him prepare business plans. The times she skipped buying things for herself so he could invest in his company. The endless sacrifices. The years she spent believing they were building a future together. Now none of it seemed to matter. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I helped build this life." "I know." "Then how can you do this?" Holden's answer shattered her. "Because I deserve someone who matches where I am now." The room went silent. At that moment, Nerissa understood. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about happiness. It wasn't about compatibility. Holden had become ashamed of the woman who stood beside him before the money arrived. Then came the final blow. Aubrey Lynette walked through the front door. Nerissa's entire body went numb. The sight confirmed everything. The late nights. The distance. The lies. The betrayal. Aubrey stopped beside Holden and slipped her hand into his. Neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. The truth was standing right in front of her. Nerissa felt something inside her break. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like a fragile piece of glass finally cracking beyond repair. Weeks later, the divorce became official. The mansion was gone. The marriage was gone. The future she dreamed about was gone. For months afterward, Nerissa cried herself to sleep. Sometimes she stared at old photographs for hours. Sometimes she replayed happy memories in her mind. Sometimes she wondered if Holden would realize his mistake and come back. But while Nerissa was drowning in heartbreak, Holden was busy enjoying his new life. What neither of them knew was that the hardest years of Nerissa's life were about to begin. And those years would slowly transform the broken woman he abandoned into someone he would never see coming. The years after the divorce were the hardest years of Nerissa Quill's life. The pain did not disappear when the marriage ended. If anything, it became worse. Every morning she woke up hoping the heartbreak would hurt less. Every night she went to bed feeling the same emptiness. The woman who once helped build a successful business now struggled to rebuild herself. At first, she could not even look at old photographs. The memories hurt too much. Sometimes she would stare at her phone, hoping Holden would call. He never did. Meanwhile, social media was filled with pictures of Holden and Aubrey attending luxury events, sailing on yachts, and living the life Nerissa once dreamed of sharing with him. Each photo felt like another wound. Still, she refused to give up. If she could not save her marriage, she would save herself. She poured her remaining savings into a small consulting business. For a few months, she worked harder than ever. Then the business failed. The loss was devastating. Many nights she sat alone in her tiny apartment staring at unpaid bills. But she tried again. This time she launched a boating service company. She spent months planning and investing. It failed too. The second failure hurt even more than the first. Friends quietly stopped calling. People who once respected her now looked at her with pity. Some even whispered that Holden had been the reason for her success all along. Those words stung. Because Nerissa knew the truth. She had helped build Holden's success. Yet now she was struggling to prove she could succeed on her own. Years passed. She started another project. Then another. Each one collapsed. Each failure chipped away at her confidence. One evening, after receiving another rejection from investors, Nerissa sat alone on a harbor bench watching boats drift across the water. For the first time, she considered quitting. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she wasn't good enough. Maybe Holden had been right to leave her behind. The thought brought tears to her eyes. Then a voice interrupted her. "You look like someone carrying the weight of the world." Nerissa turned and saw an elderly woman standing nearby. Her name was Paxton Grier. Paxton had spent decades building successful coastal businesses throughout South Carolina. Over the next several months, an unexpected friendship grew between them. Paxton never gave Nerissa money. She gave her something far more valuable. Wisdom. Patience. Perspective. "You keep chasing fast success," Paxton told her one afternoon. "Most people fail because they look where everyone else is looking." Those words stayed with Nerissa. She began studying coastal development, harbor infrastructure, and environmental regulations. For the first time, she stopped chasing trends. She focused on solving real problems. Slowly, she noticed something others ignored. Cities were struggling to modernize waterfront areas while meeting environmental standards. The need was growing every year. It was difficult work. Complicated work. But it was necessary. Nerissa decided to build a company around that need. The first year was slow. The second year was barely better. Many days she questioned herself. Yet unlike her previous businesses, this one survived. Then something surprising happened. Clients returned. Referrals increased. New contracts arrived. The company began growing. Not overnight. Not by luck. But through years of persistence. Meanwhile, far away, Holden's empire was beginning to crack. He was making riskier decisions. Ignoring trusted advice. Borrowing money from people who demanded results. And hidden deep inside his company's future was a massive $12 billion harbor redevelopment contract. A contract tied to approvals from a growing coastal infrastructure company. The same company Nerissa had spent years building from the ground up. Neither Holden nor Aubrey paid much attention to the company's owner. That would soon become a mistake neither of them would ever forget. By the time Nerissa Quill's company became one of the most respected coastal infrastructure firms in the country, nearly 8 years had passed since her divorce. 8 years of failures. 8 years of tears. 8 years of rebuilding a life that had once been shattered. She no longer looked for Holden Bryce in old photographs. She no longer waited for phone calls that would never come. The woman who once measured her worth through someone else's love had finally learned to stand on her own. Meanwhile, Holden's life looked successful from the outside. His waterfront development company still owned luxury properties. He still drove expensive cars. He still attended exclusive events with Aubrey Lennett. But beneath the surface, serious problems were growing. Years earlier, several trusted advisors had quietly left his company after he refused to listen to warnings. Investors had started questioning his decisions. To cover losses and maintain his image, Holden borrowed huge amounts of money from dangerous lenders connected to criminal networks operating through offshore businesses. At first, the money solved his problems. Then the repayments began. And the pressure became unbearable. The one thing keeping him alive financially was a massive $12 billion harbor redevelopment contract. If he secured it, he could pay off his debts. If he lost it, everything could collapse. The final approval meeting was scheduled at a luxury conference center overlooking Charleston Harbor. That morning, Holden arrived feeling confident. Aubrey walked beside him, smiling. "This deal is already yours," she said. Holden smirked. "Of course it is." Inside the conference room sat investors, legal teams, environmental experts, and representatives from several companies involved in the project. One empty chair remained near the head of the table. The representative from the final approval company had not arrived yet. Several executives spoke respectfully about the company. Its recommendations carried enormous weight. Over the years, it had earned a reputation for integrity. Holden paid little attention. Then the conference room doors opened. A woman entered. Holden looked up. His face froze. Nerissa. For a second, he thought he was imagining things. Then anger replaced shock. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. The room became silent. Nerissa remained calm. "I'm here for the meeting." Aubrey laughed. Holden shook his head. "This meeting is for executives." "It is." "Then you're in the wrong room." Several people exchanged uncomfortable looks. Nerissa simply took a step forward. That irritated Holden even more. He pointed toward the door. "Leave." When she didn't move, his voice became louder. "You don't belong here." Aubrey folded her arms. "Maybe she's part of the cleaning staff." A few executives frowned. Nerissa remained silent. Holden walked toward her. "You've always wanted to be part of this world." Then he grabbed her arm. "Let me save you the embarrassment." Nerissa immediately pulled back. "Take your hand off me." But Holden tightened his grip. The years of humiliation. The years of betrayal. The years of struggle. Everything came rushing back. Without hesitation, Nerissa slapped him across the face. The sound echoed through the room. Everyone froze. Holden stumbled backward in shock. Before he could react, one of the senior investors stood. His expression was ice cold. "Mr. Bryce, you will apologize immediately." Holden looked confused. "For what?" The investor stared at him. "Because the woman you just assaulted represents the company responsible for final approval of this contract." The room became completely silent. Holden's face lost all color. Aubrey's jaw dropped. Another executive spoke. "Ms. Quill is the founder and chief decision-maker." Suddenly every moment in the room made sense. The respect. The empty chair. The anticipation. The authority. The woman he treated like a nobody was the very person standing between him and the deal that could save his empire. Holden felt the ground disappear beneath him. Nerissa slowly took a seat at the head of the table. For the first time in his life, Holden truly saw her. Not as the woman he discarded. Not as the wife he abandoned. But as someone who had survived everything he threw at her and built something extraordinary. The contract review began. Despite what he had done, Nerissa remained professional. She reviewed every report, every financial record, every compliance document. The findings were clear. Holden's company failed several critical requirements. The risks were too high. The approval was denied. Not because of revenge. Because the facts did not support approval. The contract was awarded elsewhere. That single decision triggered a chain reaction. Investors withdrew support. Banks became nervous. Projects stalled. Creditors demanded payment. The dangerous lenders who had funded Holden's reckless decisions began calling every day. Weeks later, threats replaced conversations. Months later, fear replaced confidence. One night, Holden sat alone in his mansion holding an old photograph. It showed him and Nerissa standing outside their first apartment. Neither of them had money. Both were smiling. For the first time in years, tears filled his eyes. He finally understood something he should have understood long ago. The greatest thing he ever built was not his company. It was the woman who believed in him when nobody else did. And he threw her away. A week later, Holden disappeared. Authorities later discovered he had been killed by the same criminal lenders he owed millions of dollars. His greed had finally caught up with him. When Nerissa heard the news, she sat quietly in her office overlooking the harbor. For a long time, she said nothing. Then a single tear rolled down her cheek. Not because she wanted him back. Not because she regretted moving on. But because she remembered the young man she once loved before money changed him. She whispered softly, "I wish you had never forgotten who you were." Then she looked out at the water and returned to work. The future ahead of her had been earned through pain, patience, courage, and perseverance. And nobody could ever take that away. Moral lessons of this story. Never disrespect the people who helped you during your hardest days. Success without humility can destroy everything you work to build. Real wealth is not money. It is character, loyalty, and integrity. Failure is not the end if you keep learning and moving forward. Revenge is temporary, but personal growth creates lasting victory. Every decision creates consequences, whether good or bad. The people who truly love you are often worth more than the success you chase. Greed, pride, and arrogance may bring short-term gains, but they often lead to long-term destruction. Persistence can turn years of failure into eventual success. Treat everyone with respect because you never know who they may become tomorrow.